All right, everybody, welcome to this very wonderful interview that we have with Cysion here, the lead designer for Forgotten Empires. So today we're going to be talking about the new Dawn of the Dukes expansion, and just going to be going through all of the new civs, what they bring to the table, and how we can expect to play them out in all of our games as we are spamming them on the ladder for the next several weeks. So I am really excited. So definitely. Let's say hi, Cysion. Yeah.
Hello. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it should be fun. We've met once at least. We met at ECL.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed.
So
I love meeting the community. There's so many events, at least pre-COVID, in the before times, where there were so many opportunities to meet the community. It's always good fun.
it's what I found that I enjoy the most, honestly, in anything Age of Empires, is just going out and meeting people in the community. So hopefully one day we'll be able to do that all again. Of course, this is all about Dawn of the Dukes, which definitely sounds like a really cheesy 60s zombies movie. You got medieval Central European zombies. That's fine. But I guess that brings me to my first question. Why did you go in this direction for the DLC? Like, why focus on, okay, you're doing essentially the Western Slavic nations, Bohemia, Poland. Why?
Why? All right. So there's a lot of things that go on there, right? So before we start making any expansion, we look at history at large, right? In the past, we've done African kingdoms, which really focused on Africa, and then like Portugal in its early interaction with the exploration of African continents, and then we went to Rise of the Rajas, like Asia. And we really like that approach of saying, okay, there's this little region that we can focus on and tell the stories of that region in the campaigns as well. And it had just been such a long time since we've gone to that specific part of the world, but also because in the original game, in the Forgotten came out, we added the Slavic civ, but the Slavic civ was such a huge umbrella term that actually covers so many civs underneath that we really felt that we had to revisit that and give more visibility to some of the civilizations that are now under the Slavic umbrella, but are actually certainly deserving of their own unique civilization as well.
Well, you did add the Bulgarians in last con, so we kind of have that dipping our toes into the South Slavic cultures, and now we have the West Slavs and then the Slavs, which
Yes.
will make everything just that much more confusing. But that's fine. But obviously, the in-game Slavs are meant to represent the Rus states with the boyars and the Druzhina and all that good stuff. So I guess more specifically, when we're focusing on Eastern Europe, Central Eastern Europe, there are still several other options you could go for. I guess I want to know, okay, so we have Poland and Bohemia. Why those two specifically when you could go for like Serbs, Vlachs, Croats? I mean, obviously, there are all tons of options for civilizations, but what like stood out to you the most in wanting to pick these two?
So when we pick civilizations, we usually go for, there's a lot of criteria I would look at.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying we put it in the table and we say like, okay, this is points for each civ, but it's kind of like that. We look at each civilization that is a possibility
Mm-hmm.
in that area and then say, okay, what storylines are available there? What historical significance was there for these empires at the time? What's their name recognition? It's also something to look at. Did they have any heroic figures that stand out? I think the perfect example there is something that Ensemble Studios did back in the day with the Huns.
Oh yeah.
The Huns as a culture, you can't say anything about it. Nothing. But everybody knows Attila the Hun and his story. So that just that one guy and the legacy of, well, basically destruction that he left behind was enough to say, okay, we're going to make a Hunnic civilization.
And then you have the Huns, and then they're one of the most popular civs for 20 years.
Exactly. And that's kind of how we look at it. Like we weigh up all those things. Like, did they have a special soldier? Is it an interesting story to tell? And then we weigh those up and see, okay, what's combined do we think gives the most interesting things that we can add here? And that's how we ended up with Poland and Bohemia.
Yeah, and I think that it's pretty clear from just your the campaign selections and the unique unit selections that it's okay. This is pretty clear. They wanted to go with these sorts of things because they're very noticeable, like a giant box on wheels that is the Hussite wagon.
The Hussite wagon was such an interesting one because it was a genuine invention, right?
Mm-hmm.
I never figured out what the history was between the Korean War wagon. I think it was
Well,
vaguely based on the Hwacha, but
vaguely based on the Hwacha. Thankfully, I actually study, like, my degree is in East Asian history and international relations, and I specifically study Korea. So the War Wagon doesn't actually have any sort of real historical basis. And obviously, like, way back in the day, Ensemble added Koreans because they wanted to break into the Korean market and try and compete with StarCraft. We got Grunt, but didn't really compete with Brood War back in the day. But still, Koreans are a great civ. Even though the War Wagon doesn't actually make sense logically or historically, having that more defensively oriented cav archer, which I think you could describe the War Wagon as, really fits the Koreans, like, how they fought historically, because they were primarily, their armies were actually primarily cav archers. When I was in Korea, like, I saw like bows and stuff like that from the 800s, 900s, more closely related to like the Mongols and Manchu people than you'd think. Yeah, that's interesting how that all worked out. I am getting off topic. I do that a lot.
No, I mean, I'm very happy to hear that indeed it was completely fictional to hear it from somebody who actually studied it.
Yeah.
And when we looked at the war wagon that the Bohemians actually historically used, the Hussite wagon, it was such an interesting concept. Like, okay, we have this wagon that they invented, that they used in their medieval warfare. How can we actually bring that into the game? Contrary to the almost fictional war wagon that we see for the Koreans. So that was certainly an interesting challenge to bring.
Oh yeah. Well, and I guess that sort of leads us in. I was going to start talking about the civs. Start with Bohemians because I like going in alphabetical order. So if you look at like the Hussite wagon, it's the same thing as the War Wagon in AoE3, right? It's based on the same thing. Did the implementation of the War Wagon in AoE3 affect how you wanted to look at the Hussite wagon as a unit?
Not at all. In H3, it is really a dragoon type unit, as they call it there, just like anti-cavalry. That's how that functions in H3. It's drawn, a horse drawn, and there's like there's basically two barrels sticking out.
I remember.
Front, and they shoot at. It's not at all how a Hussite wagon was historically used. And well, to be fair, like when we looked at it, we're like, okay, how was it used? Like it was deployed on the battlefield, and then you would have cannoneers or archers standing in that wagon and then fire from a covered space. That is not something you can easily put in Age of Empires. Not in Age of Empires 3, not in Age of Empires 2. We did experiment with it very, very briefly. We're like, okay, how about we make it a wagon that it can be deployed, like packed and unpacked like a trebuchet? That didn't work at all. How about we make it a unit that you can garrison? Like you put hand cannoneers and archers in it, and then it makes it stronger. Like that's how it worked, right? Like you had your guys going in there, seek shelter, and then shoot from there. We tried that, didn't work out. And then in the end, we landed on. We still wanted to have that protection aspect. Like we want to make sure that the Hussite wagon has a bit of that historical background attached to its gameplay as well. And then we came to a very, very obscure mechanic that's already in the game, but was never really exploited. Is maybe
utilized?
Explored, yes, utilized, explored. Yeah. And that is that the Hussite wagon actually blocks incoming attacks. So if you say like, hey, I have a Hussite wagon and behind me there's a guy standing. If my enemy wants to target the knight behind the Hussite wagon will actually absorb the damage instead. it's a very, very small mechanic. You can only see it in the game if you have like a villager repairing
Yeah,
behind the ram.
that was like the first thing that came to mind. Is like, okay, you have you're trying to position your villagers behind your mangonels or whatever, so that the tower has to shoot the mangonel. I know T West did a video, a couple of years ago, and it's a really complicated. No idea that it was that crazy, but
Mhm.
I guess the first thing that comes to mind is that, okay, so say you have some Hussite wagons and you have some archers behind it that you want to protect. The way that units and buildings attack in Age of Empires is obviously that they attack the closest target. So how useful in practice is being able to block damage if the Hussite wagon, just by being in front, is likely to do that anyway?
Well, first of all, for micro,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of the same like with rams. The ram will soak up a lot of the damage, um, and also, well, so you can't really work around that. That's one thing. Secondly, also, it's a unit by itself. It's not just a support unit. It does its own attack, which makes it much easier to combine it with other units. If I were to say like, oh, I'm going to make this army and I put a ram in front of it, um, it's a very different army that you control compared to, let's say, how I have this army and it has some Hussite wagons in front of it. All of a sudden, these Hussite wagons have more than a functionality than just being there to absorb damage. So it
And
does play out quite differently.
oh yeah, yeah. I can certainly imagine that. And I guess speaking now more towards Bohemians broadly, where do you see them fitting into the game as a civilization? Like, okay, we have 37 civs. Add in these two, we got 39, three times the starting amount from Age of Kings. And obviously, as we add more civs, the design space becomes trickier and trickier to find ways of making civs feel, unique and interesting. How did you, go about that with Bohemians, and where do they fit into the game?
This was a very, very long winding process because indeed, when you look at the meta and kind of how civs play out, there's certainly a lot of similarities, and we certainly appreciate that some civilizations play differently, work differently. Like I'm always happy to see um, Inca, for example, with their different units and their rosters. Like they have three unique units, if you count the eagle as well.
I
Um,
call them pseudo unique units.
yeah, indeed.
Yeah,
But it's something that only three civilizations have. So
yeah.
that's quite cool. And I love to see that. Like it's different. You play differently. The build order is also differently. Like you have the starting llama, you have the houses that take more population. Um, and then we were thinking, okay, we have those new civilizations. We're not going to go full Inca. That's not possible. But how can we make sure that whatever we put in there is actually what they should be playing with? Uh, for example, for the Bohemians, it's gunpowder and monks. Very, very tricky units to actually put into the gameplay, right? Because they come in so late. By
Very
the time you get to
expensive,
that
and
point,
they're not very like meta. They're not archers, and they're not knights, and they're not eagle
yes,
warriors. So I mean, what are they like? Do they even exist?
exactly. And that is something we really, really worked on quite a long time to figure that out. Like, can we make something else? I mean, you can go knights with Bohemians. Is it the best option? Probably not, not by a long shot. But then what we figured out was like, okay, hand cannoneers are now available in the Castle Age. They're not available in the Imperial Age. You still
Well, you
need
can make them in
chemistry.
the Imperial Age, but you can
Oh
also
yes,
start
yes,
making them
of
in
course.
Castle Age.
You don't need to wait. So you can make them in the Castle Age if you want to. You do need to research chemistry. So that means that chemistry also moves to the Castle Age. And all of a sudden you have crossbowmen with chemistry. And you can then combine that with hand cannoneers, which have a slightly different niche there. Um, and that's where it gets interesting, right? Like you're already in the Castle Age and you see a combination that you would not have ever seen before. Will it work out? Will we actually make sure that we don't have a, I don't know, crossbow into arbalest meta with Bohemians? It remains to be seen. From our playtesting, it does feel that there are options outside of that. But it was certainly our design intent to work around that.
Oh yeah, and I think that it is a very interesting concept. I mean, yes, we have already had like Burgundians with the idea of like moving Cavalier in age earlier and stuff like that, but I feel like that's one of the things that you can still do, that there's still design space for, that can give you a very different experience without having to completely, like, okay, this is an entirely new unit, like an Eagle Warrior, Step Lancer, Battle Elephant, that sort of thing. And I think that, with hand cannons, I do believe they are getting buffed more, right? So that they're just better in general. So they should be a bit more attractive.
Yes, indeed. I think their projectile speed will be increased a bit as well. And we also had some buffs already in the previous patch going out. So in general, hand cannoneers are better, but especially for Bohemians, I think they will be faster walking as well. But that requires a unique technology.
Yeah, that
You can make
is Wagenburg tactics, right?
Yeah, indeed, correct.
My pronunciations are all going to be top tier, by the way. Absolutely zero butchering of any word. But I think something else, just sort of running through their bonuses right here, because I'm sure like these civs are going to be new for people. Unlike me, because I'm weird, I like to memorize the tech trees as quickly as possible. But most people don't stare at tech trees for hours on end, and that's all right, I suppose. But helping you go for any other sort of strategy like that, we have blacksmiths, universities, and monasteries all cheaper. 100 wood, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like Saracens, but like all of the other economic buildings.
Yes, that was really to make them, work that their bonuses better. Like if you want to give them a bonus for monks, or you want to give them a bonus for, hand cannoneers, you require chemistry. And getting to that point, it's like, oh, damn, I need to make this 200 wood investment to get my university up. I need to pay for the monastery. Then just the blacksmith to keep my other units alive. That's a very steep investment. So it was absolutely necessary to give that discount to give them those options.
Well, if you combine, especially the cheaper blacksmiths and then monasteries with your free mining camp upgrades, which is another civ bonus, and even villagers being affected by fervor and sanctity, you're looking at a strong clown civ right here. That's one of the first things that comes to mind. Is that I imagine Eddie hanging out in the club somewhere, is just seeing the ability to drop 3 monasteries right away, lots of gold income from your free gold mining upgrades, and then just spamming monks all day long. So you imagine these would be a good arena civ, right?
They have everything to be an arena civ, absolutely. But if we notice at any point, like, hey, it's too strong, or they need a nerf, then we'll do that. There is no controversy there. But for now, if you just look at it, any arena player will be over the moon with this.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm half a clown myself, and I'm excited to play these guys. It should be a lot of fun. Well, one, mining camp upgrade's free. We already have Malians with the free gold mining upgrade. They are getting something different, right? Because otherwise it would be an overlapping bonus.
I think we talked about that, but I would have to check what exactly the solution there was.
Okay.
That was so that's an interesting thing. So I've been for many years the phase of like, hey, I actually personally designed probably every civilization pre-DE, well, up till Lithuanians. I think that was the last thing I fully designed. And over the years, we've been growing the team as well, and they've been taking over some responsibilities, helping out with balance, and making sure that across the many civilizations we have now, that we don't run into problems. A lot of those issues, I'm very happy that the team has taken those over. This also means that I have a little less visibility on some of the finer details.
Oh, that's fine. I think that what that system is right now is much more preferable than having you have to wear the hats of all of the different civilizations as this game becomes even more complex, when it's already, it's complex enough that we're still playing, Age of Empires at its core 20 years later. Fervor and sanctity affecting villagers, I think that might, at first glance, people might find that a bit strange. Why those 2 upgrades specifically, and how does that sort of play into the civ? Because Fervor, in case people don't know, it makes your monks move faster, normally 15%. So it's wheelbarrows plus 10%, handcart plus 10%, Berber speed bonus plus 10%. This is going to be plus 15%. And then Sanctity is plus 50% HP, so that would be giving villagers how much HP? Because is it the 25 HP, or does that count Loom?
I don't know the exact value.
Yeah. Regardless, your villagers are getting tankier and faster.
Yeah,
Bottom line.
exactly. The way we started with this bonus is, well, it's actually, it came from a historical background, like the Hussite Wars, the religious conflict at the time in medieval Bohemia. And we were thinking, okay, how can we do something with the monastery text that we haven't done yet? It's maybe a bit controversial, but I think what Ensemble Studios did back in the day with the monk text, and saying like every technology you do gives a bit of HP to your monks. I thought that was brilliant. I was like, this is a completely different way of looking at those technologies.
It ensured that people actually ever researched herbal medicine pre-DE, or fervor back when it didn't affect monks when they weren't carrying relics.
There you go. And that is something that I found so interesting. And I was like, okay, can we, for the monk technologies, also give another way of looking at that and expand that gameplay? And we looked at all the texts, but yeah, of course, these are the only two that make sense for villagers, for other soldiers, really. And it also really tied in well with the other parts of the civ design. Like if you're more of a slightly late game civ, you need to catch up. And yeah, by researching fervor, your villagers are faster, better for your economy, helps you in your boom actually. Which is again an arena feature that you can use.
Hold on, let me get my rainbow wig and then my red honk nose.
And additionally, you have the sorry, what was it? Sanctity. It's not something that I think will come into play a lot, but if you're being raided, a bit of extra HP certainly helps.
An extra couple hits to be killed from a hussar or something like that. Not
There
anything any civ's going to complain about.
Yep, exactly.
And then the final main civ bonus is Spearmen gain plus 25% bonus damage. How does that play out in terms of impacting, like, okay, does it take one fewer hit to kill knights with pikemen, or what was the sort of goal and how does that work out?
So the goal was to have it, basically, if you look at Bohemians, they're not a very mobile civ. And we know that mobile civs tend to do a bit better, dominating the rank ladder. Mobility is everything. Being able to pick your battles helps so much. Bohemians kind of like some of that because they can make knights, they can make cavaliers, but they're not very good.
Their stable tech tree is like, Korean tier, right? Like it's
yes.
it's not very good. Yeah.
It's not very good at all. But then we were like, okay, as a Bohemian player, you need to be able to react to a more mobile attack. And that's where the spearman bonus comes in. Like, hey, okay, I'm being under attack, or I'm having these raids, or I'm expecting a scout rush in my town. Okay, let's put a spearman there, and we know that spearman is going to do so much more damage to what's coming in. Practically, looking at the stats, I'm gonna say similar. It's very close to the Japanese bonus, actually. That's what it mostly resembles, effect-wise. About the exact
and that's
hits,
really good. Like that is one of the best, spearman-related bonuses in the game. Japanese halbs are scary. They're very scary. And spearmen in feudal age, like, you think you can take a fight with like 3 scouts, and against a spearman, it's like you lose a scout anyway, and you get sad, and then you lose 100 rating in 2 days.
Exactly. It's not exactly the same, so it's slightly different. Like the amount of hits that you will need will vary, but it's kind of in that line of strength that we're looking at.
Well, it punishes mistakes more because it's, you can't react as much if like the straight up front damage is just going to kill you faster. So I think that's really interesting. But that brings us to the team bonus. Markets work 80% faster, in line with, of course, the Malian and Bulgarian bonuses for faster working economic buildings. How does this work out? Because you have caravan to research, the 2 sling upgrades, coinage and banking, guilds, and then trade cards, and that's it, right?
Yes, indeed. It's just to get your trade going a bit faster. It's a minor bonus. I'm saying most team bonuses are kind of in that area. Like, it's nice to have in certain circumstances, but very few team bonuses kind of allow you to build a like a tactic around it, especially now
Saracens
that
say
you have.
hi.
Oh yeah,
Britons
there's
say
certainly
hi.
certainly exceptions. But what you always need to be careful with is like we have now so many civs.
Oh yeah.
The combinations with team bonuses is something we want to be careful with. So this specific team bonus is more like, okay, I'm playing a team game, and it's easier to get my trade going. It makes it more forgiving if you're like, oh damn, I forgot to do my trade. Oh, no worries, you'll get there a bit faster now.
Or if your teammates forget to do trade, and then
Yeah.
you're pinging the corner constantly, like, "Hey, build a market, build a market." I think
Are you
that
talking
is
about me?
quite useful for sure, especially since Bohemians are gonna. They seem like a civ that really like having very gold heavy armies, so being able to maintain access to that for them, personally, is certainly quite nice, as well as of course the entire team. I guess thinking about late game and gold, we have the other unique unit for the Bohemians, the Hofnisse, the
Yes.
big bombard cannon.
Yes, so the Uvnice is like it's
Nietzsche.
bomber cannon upgrade. It's available in the Imperial Age. So even though you can do chemistry earlier, you can do it in the Castle Age if you want. It does not unlock the bombard cannon until the Imperial Age. It unlocks there, and then you already have the upgrade that you can research right after if you want to. Now, it's not a straight upgrade in stats, in raw stats. It's not like, oh, now it has double the HP or double the damage. We mostly looked at giving it a bit more splash damage. It's kind of a onager bombard cannon hybrid. Now, that looks or sounds incredibly strong. It certainly is strong, and we were especially careful with making sure, like, oh, doesn't that make them win every single bombard cannon dancing game? Does it not just take out like a pack of trebuchets in one shot? We were very careful with the numbers there, so we iterated quite a bit. It is certainly a very, very good option against archers, but you can still pick them off as an enemy. Like if you face an Hufnice, the Bohemian players certainly have the advantage.
Wrong centuries.
Yes, wrong century indeed. They
Uh,
certainly have an advantage, but you can totally still take them out and go toe to toe with them.
when you talk about having a larger splash damage radius, I think immediately of torsion engines with Ethiopians. How
Mhm.
does the Hufnice compare to like torsion engine bombard cannons?
I would have to see. I know we made that comparison at some point during the iteration process, but I forgot the exact numbers, so
It's
I'm
fine.
have to excuse me on this answer.
The AoE nerd in me is like, okay, what are the exact numbers? I want to know how this compares in this situation. But I imagine they're all going to be really good. Pretty expensive overall. So we already mentioned Wagenberg tactics makes the gunpowder units move faster. I mean, that's just good. Helps your slower units scoot around a bit faster. And then that leaves the last sort of unique aspect about the Civ, their Imperial Age unique tech. Hussite reforms, monks and monastery tax now cost food, right? So
Yes, indeed.
that is, if you're having a monk tech as your Imperial Age unique tech, because I believe this is the only one, like it has to be pretty strong. This seems pretty strong, so tell me about it.
It is very strong. I think it definitely has a very high skill cap because monks in the very late game are difficult to control.
Unless you're the
In
AI.
Yeah, oh yeah. If you're an AI, oh, good luck playing against this in the AI. But it has a very high skill cap. Like it was seeing monks in the late game. I mostly see it like with Aztecs on like a choke points where they have some meat shield between them and then the enemy and can try and pick up some siege or some heavy units with their monks. But it's still very unforgiving. Like if you lose a monk, you lose 100 gold. If you lose 10 monks to an onager shot, that's 1,000 gold. That's a risk that most players just cannot afford to take. And that's what we try with this technology because I'm not going to say they're trash monks. They still cost some gold, but the risk is much, much lower. So I'm actually curious if there is an opportunity for players now to say like, hey, I'm going to make 20 monks. And it's okay if I lose them because it's only going to cost me, I don't know, 200 gold or something. And yeah, try to swing battles like that.
Yeah, that I think that should be really interesting. Late game monks is like as you say, it's not something we see all that often, but if the monks are just such an affordable option, I feel like against any sort of anything that uses expensive units like a cav civ especially or siege, lots of siege units, I think that it can be a really strong option. But I think that also leads us into the final thing I want to talk about with Bohemians, and that was how you would expect them to play out on different sorts of map types, game modes. We already talked a lot about Arena. Arabia, the classic Age of Empires map. They don't seem like they're going to be like a top tier civ, which is totally fine, but I still think they should have some really strong options with like Castle Age chemistry, crossbowmen, and stuff like that.
I think to play Bohemians right, I think there will be a bit of I think the better you understand Age of Empires, the better you might be able to handle the civilizations because they have some very strong bonuses that are a bit more reactive. Like we have the spearmen bonus against cavalry. That's a bit of a reactive bonus. Like if you're sure that you're going to be scout rushed, you might take the risk and say like, okay, I'm just going to station some spears here. I'm going to make sure that I'm not too vulnerable to archers either. And that way kind of build up my advantage, my economical advantage. But that requires you to know the game because you can't abuse that bonus actively. You can't go out and say like, oh, my spearmen are better. I'm going to mass spearmen and I'm going to attack.
Have you ever seen MBL play?
There are exceptions, absolutely. But I think for most, and again, skill cap, right?
Yeah,
like a top 10 player. But somebody like myself, I can't go full spear.
Nah.
Because if the enemy doesn't do anything that has cavalry in it, yeah, good luck. But they have bonus to make that happen. And it took us a while to figure it out. Like we've played tested quite a bit on Bohemians, and it took us a long time to figure out how to play them. We just couldn't figure it out. We're like, oh Jesus, do we try to go to the castle age, try to build a university, and then immediately go hand cannoneers? So it's like, no, that doesn't work at all. You're way too late. But then we got more to like, okay, how about we focus on our crossbowmen early? I mean, crossbowman is a stable unit in most Arabian matchups, and they do have crossbowmen, and they have crossbowmen with chemistry. And from that point on, I mean, we have a strong crossbowman. You can go many ways. You can say like, okay, I need to mix this in with something else. Do I mix it in with monks? Do I mix it in with siege? My unique unit. Cavalry is probably off the table for Bohemians, but yeah, it's at that point.
Yeah,
you have
then
option.
you can go into all of your fancy support units off the back of your solid mid game crossbow play. Just in terms of trying to remember, you don't get thumb ring, but you have everything else you need for archers, right? You have arbalest, you have bracer. Yeah, that should be enough to carry you through like at least early Imperial Age before you have to do something else.
We wanted to make sure it was not one of the civilizations where there's so much going on, but their archers are just good enough to carry them the whole game.
Exactly.
That's why the thumb ring is off the table for them.
That's definitely good idea. Otherwise, we get another Arb Siege Ram Civ.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thinking now, I want to talk about team games a little bit. This definitely seems like a civ that would much prefer to be on flank on pretty much any sort of map, just because their cavalry is not good. They're kind of a slower civ. They should be pretty competitive. Anything that's decent with archers in 1v1 Arabia kind of translates to most team games. But I think they should be well on, Black Forest. They should be doing well on arena team games as well, right?
Yeah, they definitely scream late game.
Mm-hmm.
I think they could do quite a bit of damage in Black Forest as well. The Uvnice, they don't have Siege Ram, they don't have Siege Onager, that's true.
Who needs them? You've got the super bombards.
You have those indeed, so that should make a difference. And actually, I was thinking because we're having this whole conversation, right? Mm-hmm. In a way, this really resembles on how we talk about these civs internally. Like, there's a lot of iteration, there's a lot of process, a lot of theory crafting, and then you go and play the game. We play a lot, right? Like we try to get quite a lot of games and try to see if our theory actually holds up on the battlefield. But it's very possible that next week this is released, and then Hera and Viper have a 1v1, and like it's completely different. They figure out that this works much better. Maybe they find a way that the spearman can actually be used in an active way. Like, God knows, I don't know. But then, yeah, whenever we have a chance to do next patch, we can make adjustments. So theory crafting, it gets us somewhere, but then the pro players get in and the community gets in,
and
and
then
millions of games played, and it's like, oh, okay.
yeah, I definitely know the feels on that, and I do have to say that especially like the post DE civs, I think you guys have done a good job of like, okay, something feels really goofy kind of at the start, but then they kind of you iterate and then react to okay, how does the community play this? I think especially like Tatars and Bulgarians, I think were kind of gimmicky at launch, but now they feel like good solid civs in a lot of situations. Even Burgundians and Sicilians are getting there for sure. So I think that even if something is kind of clunky at first, I think you guys should be able to, refine everything.
It's a very important part of the process there, right? Like when you come out of the game, well, actually, when you start designing, you throw so much stuff at the wall to kind of see what sticks. And there's weird, crazy, gimmicky stuff that we experimented with and then just never gets released. And that's fine. And that's an iterative process, but you need that because otherwise you're always going to be in your same set of bonuses. Like, how many times can we still make a food bonus? How many times can we still make a stone mining bonus? Like, there's not a lot of design space in that. How many times can you say, oh, cavalry gets a boost? We have HP, we have armor, we have upgrades, we have an upgrade being an age earlier now.
Faster attack speed, faster movement speed, more melee armor.
Exactly. Like you're running out of design space, so you need to break out of that at some point, and that's what we've definitely been trying. And sometimes, indeed, it doesn't necessarily work immediately, but then, indeed, in future patches, after we've seen hundreds of thousands of people play with it, we can make further adjustments much easier and much more informed by what the community has been showing us.
Yeah, well, I know I'm very excited to get my hands on Bohemians, and will certainly be playing them a lot. But, of course, they are only one half of the new civs. I think now would be a good moment to talk about our other new civ, the Poles. A civ that I know a lot of people have been asking for a very long time. So I'm sure lots of people are very excited to see how these guys are going to play out. And I guess, just right off the bat again, what is their niche? They are a cavalry civ. There are a lot of cavalry civs in the game. So what did you guys do to really sort of give them their own spot in the Age of Empires roster?
So Poland, you said it already, it was one of the most requested civilizations. And with that also came the cry for a winged hussar.
Oh, yeah.
Now, that was a very interesting conversation that we had there, because winged hussars are actually a very, very late medieval.
Yeah, that's like you're really sort of creeping in at the very end of the AoE2 time frame there.
Yes, you're in the early 16th century, really.
Yeah.
Which is actually more H3. But at the same time, we were kind of, okay, this is, if we're not doing anything with winged hussars,
then the pitchforks and torches start coming out.
Exactly. So it was a very, very different decision. Like, do we put it in, even though it's just fits?
Yeah.
Or do we leave it out? But we put it in because we were like, Poland winged hussars, we have to do it.
Give the people what they want. They want their winged hussars.
Yeah, sometimes it's as simple as that, indeed.
Yeah. And it's not like it's wildly outside of the AoE2 time frame.
Exactly. It's not like we're putting German tanks for the Teutons or anything. I mean, they do have German tanks in a way, but
yeah. I mean, those Teutonic Knights, I mean, they pack a punch.
Yep, indeed. So yeah, when we looked at the Poles, we were also having a very similar approach. Like, okay, what can we give them that is more unique and that will make them play a bit differently? And Poles have 3 unique units in a way, kind of like Incas have 3 unique units. They have the winged hussar, which is shared between Poland and Lithuania. We have the Obuk, which is their castle unit, and then we also have the Folwark, which is a unique building for the Poles that's available from the Dark Age, and it is a mill replacement.
And it's a 3x3, right? So no longer do you have to panic about having slightly uneven farms.
When
So,
we talked about that, that was the first thing that came up.
oh
Like, hey,
yeah,
if we're gonna make a new mill, can we make it 3x3?
especially if
And
it's like a special mill, like a more powerful mill, right? You know, it being
yes,
larger is sort of that natural, like that'd be the natural thing that would come to mind. So why don't you talk about the full work a little bit and what does it do? How does it play out? Because it's pretty interesting in terms of how it affects your gameplay.
it's so what it does. Like you have the full work, you build it, and then when you place it, there's like a radius around it that you can see. And it's basically the exact radius of 8 perfectly placed farms around your folwark. And the bonus applies to every farm you place within that radius of the folwark at a maximum of 8. Basically, what happens is if you place a farm next to it, as soon as the farm is fully constructed, you get, I think, at the moment, 10% of the food of that farm directly into your bank. So there is a case to say like, oh, I have a lot of wood floating. I really need food soon. Let me just pop down a few farms. I don't even need to use them straight away. But hey, I've got some food out of that. It's a bit of an unconventional food bonus as well. I mean, I mentioned it earlier. Like how many food
Yeah.
bonuses can you still come up with?
I mean, especially if
Uh,
it's farming related, there's like every farm bonus possible that exists right now. Like, how many times
exactly.
can you say farming is better? Get more food.
Exactly. But the way it's different is, first of all, you need to do it around your folwark.
Hmm.
Uh, but that also means, okay, how do I structure my town? Do I choose to put my farm next to my folwark and get then the food bonus? Or do I put it on a safer space, which is usually right underneath my town center in the early game? But my town center does not get that bonus, only the folwark. And we noticed that when playing as well, everybody was trying to get the folwark bonus like to the full extent. Everybody had perfectly placed farms, by the way. No T90 farms ever. Everything was perfect. But that's so much easier to rate, right? Like
Yeah, that
it's
like that was the first thing that came to mind. Is like, okay, if you're placing your farms around your full work, then it's like, okay, now a bunch of enemy units are going to run in and kill all your villagers. So
yeah.
it's kind of a risky thing, but the payoff is pretty significant. I mean, I believe farms with horse collar just in feudal age are going to be giving you 25 food right away. So that is very significant.
It is significant, and that's why there is a trade-off, and we absolutely notice that trade-off. The Polish town, it's structured differently, and it takes some practice to kind of put your mills in such a position that they can still be kind of covered by your town centers. But then there's also like, okay, I probably need to build a castle in my town to help protect myself in the long in the late game. That's of course nothing new. Like castles in towns are a very popular way to kind of stop raiding.
Oh yeah.
But Poles definitely need it more than other civilizations.
So, in helping you get that castle, you have a stone miners generate gold in addition to stone bonus. So, what is that all about? So, can you mine stone and then just is it like okay, you don't need to mine gold early game or is it just kind of like a little bonus that helps you in the long run?
It's a bit of both. So early game, it's not enough to say like, oh, I don't need to mine any gold. If it's like, hey, I'm doing a tactic where I just need a tiny bit of gold. Let's say I'm just going to do a drush and need a tiny bit of extra gold. You might be able to pull it off, and then you have some extra stone to say like, I'm going to put up an extra defensive tower early on. That's where we see that coming in. But also in the late game, it just helps them a tiny bit. Um, in general, it's definitely not something where you will build your whole tactic around. I think that's going to be a too far fetched.
Yeah.
But it's a little extra. And the background of that was also interesting because Poland in Middle Ages had a lot of salt mines, which provided them with income. It was a commodity, a luxury commodity that was traded. So we were like, okay, stone mines or salt mines or whatever, things that come from the earth can give
Working
you
with the
money.
salt theme, you had I was just playing the African Royals Age of Empires 3 and getting some salt mines there.
There you go. Yeah, it's yeah. We
Your
have
team is very
some
salty.
players that that work on both for sure.
But their the Polish final bonus is villagers regenerate hit points, different per age, more per age, obviously. How helpful is this, I guess? Because early game, I just imagine, okay, so you lure a villager, or you lure a boar with a villager, it loses some HP, you're able to slowly regenerate it so that by the time feudal age comes around, then, the scouts won't kill it as quickly. Is that just sort of the idea there?
I think this is a bonus that will play out very differently across skill levels.
Yeah.
So I think it's more like mid to high range where this will matter a bit more. Like where you're kind of at the level where you can try to pick up weaker villagers. Those are now, those might be healed by the next time the raid comes around. I think also on the super high level, a villager that's almost dead will no longer be a liability in the longer game. Like if you did a poor boar lure early on, and then that villager is still alive midway through the game and then easily killed, that's probably not going to happen anymore. It's very, very edge case, but certainly on the level I play at, which is somewhere mid-tier, being raided and then being able to not have any consequences for that late game certainly helps a lot.
Oh yeah, I can definitely imagine that. Sort of working with the cavalry theme, because none of these like civ bonuses have anything to do with cavalry, at least not directly. Team bonus, scouts +1 attack versus archers. That actually seems pretty good, especially in feudal age. I'm just imagining it should be one fewer hits to kill archers with scouts.
It's a pretty strong thing that you can do. However, it is well, okay. So if we look at Poland in the early game, the one thing that really makes them stand out is the folwark. Like they can roll out more food than other civilizations. Period. There is a trade-off, sure, but that's what they can go for. Food can help you bankroll any strategy, right? You can say, okay, I can still go archers with this, I can still go skirms, I can still go any unit I want, but of course you're more encouraged to go scouts. And the team bonus applying to that certainly helps in going for scouts. But the reality is they can't really go anything in feudal age.
Oh yeah, more food is just kind of good for everything. I mean, that's why the civs that have very strong food bonuses tend to all be good in, well, most maps, to be honest. Turns out that, Aztecs, Vikings, Khmer, Mongols with hunt maps, like, food bonuses are really good, so I don't think it'll be too hard for Poles to find some area where they're going to be successful. But, of course, they are the cavalry civ, and the two unique techs, they certainly help your cavalry quite a lot. First is the Castle Age unique tech, 100% perfect pronunciation, Slakta privileges. Knights cost minus 60% gold. So
yes,
60 food, 30 gold a night, I think.
It's pretty cheap. It's very, very nice to just pump out heavy cavalry with Poland late game. But the interesting thing about that number is, and also the unit itself, it's not that strong. You do have the cavalryists, you do have husbandry, you do have bloodlines. I need to think about the blacksmiths. I think they lack the last armor upgrades.
Yeah.
But they're definitely not like your late game staple unit.
Yeah, before people panic, they're not they're very flimsy in the late game because they do miss plate barding armor. So your cavaliers, because you don't get paladins, are just going to be capping out at only 4 pierce armor, which means that arbs will shred them, as will a lot of other units. So it's really about quantity over quality. It's like supercharged Berbers, right? Berbers get 20% cheaper cavalry in general in Imp, but they at least get fully upgraded cavalier. This is like even more extreme than that.
It is way more extreme, and it also plays out very differently. Like if you're rolling with knights and you want to continue rolling with knights, it falls off.
Yeah,
pretty steeply. As soon as you get into like mid-imperial age, late imperial age, it's just like you don't do that. It certainly can help as a surprise thing, and I think it's kind of similar to how the Malay two-handed swordsmen work out. Like they There is a time where they are really good, and that just falls off completely at some point. And then it comes again because it's a trash unit, right? Polish knights are not a trash unit, but they're still very cheap. And I expect that the dynamics will be kind of in that area.
When you mentioned Malay, it's interesting because I think even more than the two-handed trashmen, I think of their elephants, because it's actually a very similar dynamic. They're super cheap, but they have like no armor, and yet they're still really powerful in those specific timings, like you say, like sort of that early power spike, and then in a very sort of long term, like, okay, you can actually transition to those guys in Imperial Age and make that happen. So it'll be really interesting. But of course, the other cavalry unit with Poles is their Hussar, the winged Hussar, and you have that helped out with, oh boy, Lechitic Legacy. Scouts are dealing some form of trample damage. How does that play out, and how many villagers are going down? How many archers are going down?
It is pretty strong, but it's luckily it's also something that can very, very easily be tweaked. So the challenge we had with the winged hussar, specifically for Poland, was we want to make sure that Poland has a reason to play with them. Like, we want to make sure that there's very valid reason that Poland can use this cool unit, because it looks really cool. That's already half reason for players to make a unit.
Yeah, it looks real cool.
So we have a cool looking unit. Now I want to make sure we can use it, that it's strong, but also not too strong, because initially we were like, okay, is this kind of heavy cavalry? Is this light cavalry? Is it somewhere in between? But it's still a trash unit. It only costs food, so it can't be too strong. So that took a lot of tweaking to kind of land at the statistics we have now. It is slightly stronger than a normal hussar, that's for sure.
But you're still missing that last armor upgrade, so...
Yeah, it's still missing that, but it does have the blast attack.
Yeah.
If you do that upgrade, so it absolutely holds up in the late game, in late Imperial, but it's also not it's not completely dominating. You need something more than just winged hussars to keep you going as Poland.
Since we haven't really talked much about their other non-cavalry options, what does the tech tree for Poles look like beyond cavalry? Like, how are their infantry and archers and siege and stuff like that?
It's pretty open outside of that. I think archer-wise, they are pretty complete. I think just their cavalry archer are not fully upgradable. Infantry-wise, they're just missing halberdiers, I think. So that's also pretty complete. And then, siege is also pretty decent to keep them going. But I think the most interesting thing here is their how their O-book.
I completely forgot about the O-book.
He's easy to forget, but he's tricky, and I'm really curious to see what the community can do with this guy.
So tell us about the O-book.
Yes, so it's an infantry unit. Infantry units are notoriously difficult to integrate in Age of Empires 2. So what we try to do is this guy, if he attacks, he has a massive hammer. If he attacks and strikes a unit, that unit loses armor. So it's not like the latest. The latest just ignores armor. This guy takes it away. What does that mean? Let's say you have an Eagle Warrior. Eagle Warrior fully upgraded, 4+4 armor, 8 total. You're fighting against some O-books. They do some strikes. Your armor for your Eagle Warrior is now down to, let's say, 2. Then all of a sudden, that unit that would otherwise shred archers can now be picked off so easily. Now, that's a theory. How will that work out in practice? We don't know. But the way it's designed, the cost of the unit, the speed by which it's created, we hope that it can serve as a interesting combination unit. You're saying like, oh, I'm having some archers, quickly gonna make some O-books to combine it, and then just send those O-books to the front line, get some of those armor reducing damage in, and then my archers can finish the job.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because, as you're saying, the O-book doesn't really synergize as well with cavalry as it does with archers, as one the Obuk can tank in front of the archers and can be that meat shield that they are liking to have. But also, armor in general Age of Empires matters more for ranged units than it does for melee units, as ranged units tend to have less attack. So just, that incremental decrease in armor tends to be really good. So it seems like, okay, you can have that really cavalry focused late game, or with the poles, or you could go with like Arb plus Obuk, and then you try and make something with a lot of pierce armor, and then the Obuks shred that, and then the Arbs kill everything. So I think it's sort of two interesting ways you can take the civilization.
Yeah, it's one thing that we were really cautious about. Like, how do we make sure that the civilization is not a one-trick pony? It is perfectly possible, like once the game is released, that people figure out that one is indeed way better, and that's indeed maybe Obuks don't work out at all. But then we can make adjustment later.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, the intent is there, so that's where we start from, and that's also where I'm curious. Like, will this work out? How will this work out in team games? Can I, for example, say like, hey, my Ethiopian archer-loving ally is going full ARPs, and I'm trying to support him by just getting the armor of everything that comes near him. Something we'll have to figure out.
So I guess that brings us, of course, to the different sorts of maps you'd play them on. Arabia, their early game options seem pretty good. They seem to have a solid, they're just a solid Arabia civ in general. In team games, do you actually prefer them in pocket for the cavalry play? Because it really will fall off in late game. Or would you rather have them on flank, where you can maybe use them as a fast imp Arb civ or something like that into Obuks?
So we mentioned earlier, right? Like, as soon as you have a food bonus, you kind of become an all-round civ, and that's something that we noticed. Like, we didn't really find an explicit weakness for Poland. It just felt like, okay, wherever you put them, they'll roll with it. Whether that's pocket, whether that's flank, it does feel that it just works out for both. Of course, pocket always offers more possibilities.
Yeah.
You have the mobility, and you have knights with bloodlines, and you have the cavalier upgrade at least, so you have that early imp advantage. I can't pick where I would prefer them. It does feel like it can swing both ways.
It'll be really interesting just to see how that plays out, especially at a high level for, me as a caster, really wanting to see how the top players make use of these civs. But honestly, both Poles and Bohemians, I think they're really interesting, and I think they will shake up the game in a lot of interesting ways. So, yeah, I can't wait to get my hands on them until they're instantly broken, and then everyone's like, OMG, this is so OP! Cysion, what are you doing?
That's the most interesting bit, right? Like, whenever a new civilization gets released, or even before it's released, there's always so much chatter between players, like, hey, is this broken, or how is it going to play out? And we definitely learned to take the kind of wait and see approach.
Yeah, I think that's smart.
When we look at actually every single civilization that has been released in the past few years on Age of Empires 2 and Age of Empires 3, every single time they were bottom tier on release. The USA civilization for Age of Empires 3, it was, there was like, oh, it's OP, it's broken. Like, and Jesus, you have 3 in the second age. What the hell are you doing? And they never, ever, in any ranking or ELO rating, left the last spot in terms of win rates. And we saw the same with Burgundians on the release as well. They were always last spots in terms of win rates. Did they have like aspects that were really strong? Absolutely. Were there things that you could abuse? Absolutely.
Flemish Revolution.
there were definitely parts. But overall, it was actually not reflected in their win rates. Like, sure, if you got to that point and did that, there was a good shot. You had a winning game.
But then, you select all military, you hit the patrol button, and then you just walk away from the keyboard.
Yeah, indeed, sure. If that's a risk you want to take, sure. But even then, we never saw them going away from the bottom, literally the last place. Win rates across all civilizations, across all rankings.
Yeah.
That's always like there's multiple sides to the aspect of balance. Like you can have specific parts that are maybe a bit broken or maybe OP or don't really work out that well. But then there's also like, okay, how does the civilization work in general?
Unless you're humans at launch.
That's the only
Yeah, I was
civilization that.
thinking like that has to be like the only exception because
Yeah.
I've been playing Age of Empires for a very long time, and that was the only time where it legitimately felt like, okay, is this like the equivalent of Teuton Death Stars in Age of Kings?
Oh yeah, indeed. Teutons in Age of Kings and
Yeah.
then Cuman with the E release. Like those are the only two civilizations I would say that were objectively broken
Yeah.
for some time. But other than that, I think usually we're middle of the pack, sometimes a bit at the bottom. Sometimes we have something that's like slightly better, but outside of Cumans and original Teutons,
Yeah.
didn't really have outrageously broken things in H2.
Because I know especially people who watch my YouTube channel love the campaigns, and I thought it'd be nice to be able to talk about them real quick.
Yeah, sure. So we are having three stories to tell this time around. So we have the story of Queen Jadwiga. She's on the cover of Dawn of the Dukes.
She's right in between us on the background.
Okay, there we go. She's either here or here.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just an interesting story to tell because we kind of have the Polish Lithuanian Commonwealth at the time. And that kind of shared history between the nations. We kind of explored in both campaigns. So we also have the Lithuanian campaign. Finally, Lithuanians have a campaign. They were the only civilizations with literally 0 missions.
I have that in my notes. It's like, yay, Lithuanians, they get a campaign. So I actually wanted to ask, was that always the plan? To wait until Dawn of the Dukes to have a Lithuanian campaign? Or was that factored into any sort of decision making?
No, because Dawn of the Dukes was absolutely not planned when we
Really?
were working on the E. Actually, none of the expansions were planned. At the time when we made the E, we just thought, I mean, I literally said it in interviews
Oh,
before
yeah,
the
that's right.
like, are you going to make more civilizations? Like,
Nah.
one thing, we're probably not going to add more civilizations. And here we are. Because, well, DE was a success. It absolutely was. And at that point, Microsoft was like, yeah, what can we do more? And yeah, here we are.
And
But
it's great. I'm glad that we're in this position.
it's a good position to be in, right? I definitely understand, like, it makes it harder to keep up with the meta, to learn all the civilizations. But it's also a sign of a healthy game.
Exactly.
And we certainly have. We have a very healthy community of so many people playing, streaming, casting. And yeah, it's more content. A lot of people just like it. What was I saying? Oh, right. Like, how do we get to Lithuanian campaigns? So this actually goes to our very, very first question. Like, what civilizations made sense?
Mm-hmm.
And because we had a Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth and we want to do something with Lithuania, that was like another check for Poland to be added. So I was like, oh, we have that combination going on. So
I actually played a custom campaign done by a guy called Elam. It was about Vytautas in Lithuania. And I know, like, I learned a lot about, the interaction the two had and the medieval bromance between the two entities. So I'll be really interested to see how that plays out. There's also some stuff with the Northern Crusades because you have those really, really sick looking new Crusader, skins and stuff. That makes me think of the classic Soviet film Alexander Nevsky, The Battle of the Ice.
Yes, indeed. So it's certainly present in the campaigns as well. I think in the screenshots we had some of those Ritterbroeders showcased, and there was a lot of speculation, like, "Hey, what are these dudes doing there?" So yeah, but they just look cool. I think that's
the most important thing.
It is. It is. I could have the most fun designed unit, but if it looks like shit, people are not going to like it.
Well, of course. But I think that's... I don't think that's an issue with any of these units. The winged hussars are sick. The wagons are sick. The obuks and their hammers are sick. So yeah, that shouldn't be too much of an issue. And I guess the other thing I wanted to ask, what is there any sort of like overall theme or like connecting idea you have with these campaigns other than like, okay, Poland and Lithuania? Because I was just thinking, okay, with Lords of the West, it was clearly like, okay, it's the bad guys from the Age of Kings campaigns with Edward Longshanks and the Burgundians. Was there anything like that, or is you just focusing on like Poland, Lithuania, especially?
So there's a bit of overlap between those two campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
There is some shared storyline or background that we have.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that this time around there was like the overarching theme. I think we have three quite distinct stories this time around. There is some interconnectivity for sure, but I think that's mostly the extent of that.
Yeah, that's it's fine with me. It's something new, which is going to be exciting, especially for me who loves the campaigns. And the final thing I wanted to ask is there any sort of update on the co-op campaigns? Because I know a lot of people are looking forward to that, myself included. It's not part of the DLC, right? So it's coming later?
Indeed. So they are going to be, we're still doing some polish on those campaigns.
Some
And
Polish? No, we
yes,
have the Polish campaign.
yes. So yeah, we're still pushing this up, doing the final touches here and there. And they will be released. They will be released for free at some point during a future update. When that is, can't say yet, but we're still doing the final touches there. But yeah, absolutely, it's going to be a free update for the base game.
That should be a lot of fun. Can't wait to start trying to onager T West.
It's so much like it's. I mean, I work a lot on. I mean, it's my job, right? Like day after day, I'm working on Age of Empires, and I remember I was thinking Friday night, and I was like, "Oh, we need to do a test. It's already the end of the day, but hey, you want to play one of the co-op campaigns?"
Mm-hmm.
And we started to play, and then it was 10 o'clock in the evening. We're like, "Hey, want to play another one?" Sure. And then it was 11 o'clock. I was like, "Hey, want to play another one?" Sure. It was midnight. Want to play another one? Sure. And at that point, we're like, "Oh, geez, it's Saturday morning. Let's let's call it a day." And it's just because I'm having so much fun with it.
It is really fun. I know, like the ones you did release, the historical battles. Like TOS and I did them all in one sitting. Like, it's just like, oh yeah, let's just go to the next one. Let's just go to the next one.
It's such a different take, and just being in a call and talking about the things, and oh, let's go kill that dude, and then oh, you want to go there, and then like it's completely different. It's the same, but very, very different.
Oh, you're under attack? Too bad.
That's another way to do it. It's like, screw you. I'm gonna boom. You can feel the Turkish rods while I just gather gold. Sure.
Yep. Gather your gold mines, especially.
It depends on what kind of teammate you want to be. That's totally up to you.
Not that bad. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. But I am glad that, obviously I'd rather wait for something to be really nice than just kind of have it forced to be rushed out. So I'm glad that it's not like part of this DLC or anything like that. But that sort of brings us to the conclusion, the end of this interview. I guess the first thing I want to ask is, what are you looking forward to the most, or what did you enjoy designing the most with this expansion?
Well, I can say what was most difficult, the Hussite wagon.
Yeah.
By a long shot. Jesus, the amount of iterations to just get that unit right was insane. And I just hope it works now. If not, then yeah, we'll have to keep on tweaking that. But I'm most curious to see if we can see any late game monks with Bohemians. That's something we talked about briefly earlier.
Yeah.
I'm curious if that works out. Yeah, I just want to see that people have fun and playing the civilizations. When Dawn of the Dukes released, we noticed that just in the first 24 hours.
You mean Lords of the West?
What did I say? Don't
Dawn of
Duke.
the
Sorry. Yeah.
Dukes.
Yeah. Sorry.
Unless you have,
When,
oracle powers and can see the future.
when Lord of the West was released, we looked at it like how many times do people actually pick the new civilizations, and we noticed that just in the first 24 hours, Burgundians and Sicilians were picked more than some of the civilizations were picked in the past month, because they want to try them and want to
Oh yeah.
figure them out, and that was so good to see. And I'd love to see, yeah, a similar reaction with Dawn of the Dukes next week.
Yeah, I know I'm really excited, and I just want to thank you for coming on, doing this interview. I had a lot of fun, learned a lot. Hope you enjoyed. Sorry to keep you again, but thought it was a good chat.
No worries, thanks for having me. And I'm also looking forward, because we did a lot of theory crafting, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
like,
yeah.
hey, we think that this will work out like this. There is certainly gonna be somebody who makes a snippet out of this,
Oh yeah,
uh, and then combines it with the reality.
and it's going to be
That's
exactly the opposite.
so.
But this just
that,
shows, it's the best intentions, right? you know.
that's the thing. Like we start with intentions. That's our goal. But it's a video game that is played by so many clever people as well, that figure out ways to use your designs in a very different way, as every video game has, really.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, it's just up to us to respond to that later.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to be playing it a ton come Tuesday. That is when the expansion launches on August 10th. So definitely everyone go and check that out. It's going to be on Steam and Microsoft Store and all that stuff. And yeah, it gives you 2 new civs, 3 new campaigns, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So thank you all so much for watching. Thanks, Cysion, and see you guys next time.